What's up, military millionaires? I just saw this announcement online. This is huge, and this is great for people, especially if you live in base housing. Good to understand. So I just wanted to walk through this and do kind of a mix between a reaction video and an explanation on some of these bullet points. So I did look at this briefly, but I didn't write any notes down, so I'm going to do this ad lib. But essentially, the Military Housing Privatization Initiative is a tenant bill of rights. So this is the rights that you have when you live in base housing. So this is what is to be upheld by privatized housing people, so we don't have the issue. A few months ago or a year ago, you may have seen an article about a family who essentially lived in a house that was like rat infested and all this other stuff. It was trash, and the tenants got evicted. I don't know. It was a big mess, and it just kind of brought out all of the military issues with base housing that some people had. Now, granted, I will also say there are a lot of people who live in base housing and live very nasty lifestyles, so sometimes rats and stuff is your own fault. So definitely keep a clean house, but obviously these are the Bill of Rights and what you are allowed to have and expected to have from housing. So this was signed by Secretary of Defense Mark Esper, Secretary of the Army Ryan McCarthy, Acting Secretary of the Navy Thomas Modly, Secretary of the Air Force Barbara Barrett. Then they've signed the Bill of Rights, Department of Defense. Now, we're going to open it up and take a look. Ooh, fancy. All right, look, so it's all official. It says the DOD is committed to ensuring our nation's most valued resource is the military service members and families have access to safe, quality, and well-maintained homes and communities on DOD installations. The National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2020 set out 18 rights of military service members and their families residing in privatized housing. The Department of Defense commits to ensuring that privatized housing tenants receive quality housing and fair treatment from the Military Housing Privatization Initiative project owners, MHPI, mouthful, companies that operate and maintain privatized housing. Sometimes you would think that these people who write these things never served in the military. Like, they don't understand. Like, we don't. There's so many big words. It is paramount that residents receive the full benefit of each right. The Department of Defense has through each of its military departments, will work diligently and expeditiously to develop the processes and procedures needed to implement these rights and make tenants aware of them. However, many of the rights set forth by Congress pertain to legal matters that do not lend themselves to unilateral action by the department. To the extent it is not already the case, the military departments commit to working with the MHPI companies to incorporate these rights and procedures into appropriate project legal documents. In some cases, more work is required before the benefits of these rights are fully available to tenants. The department commits to providing the full benefit of the following 15 rights no later than May 1st, 2020. So it's coming up quick. Now, let's get into the part you all came to see. This is the rights. The first one is the right to reside in a housing unit and a community that meets applicable health and environmental standards. Pretty self-explanatory. Number 2, the right to reside in a housing unit that has working fixtures, appliances, and utilities, and to reside in a community with well-maintained common areas and amenity spaces. So this pertains to everything from having parks safe for children to having appliances that work, utilities that work. Now, I had some pretty bad experiences at one point with an air conditioning system that just kept breaking, and somehow I ended up on the hook for the bill when it was essentially working overtime because the humidifier thing wasn't working in Hawaii, and it was just running on and off 24/7, which was a mess. So I appreciate this. The right to a written lease with clearly defined rental terms to establish tenancy in a housing unit. Now, that's illegal, that's required by law, including any addendums and other regulations imposed by the landlord regarding occupancy of the housing unit and common areas. Okay, see, that's normal, and you need to read that. But the number 4 is cool. It says the right to a plain language briefing before signing a lease and 30 days after move-in by the installation. Woo! Still early morning. I'm not even editing that out. Sorry, you get the raw footage for this video. The right to a plain language briefing before signing a lease and 30 days after move-in by the installation housing office and on all rights and responsibilities associated with tenancy of the housing unit. including information regarding the existence of any additional fees authorized by the lease, utility payments, procedures for submitting tracking work orders, and identify the military tenant advocate and dispute resolution process. So that means that you have the right to have it broken down Barney style for you. That's essentially what this is saying. You need to be able to understand this. So I know they give you a briefing and they walk you through all this stuff, but if you're still confused, you have the right to say, hey, like, I don't know what any of that means. Please break it down for me, which is good. The right to have sufficient time and opportunity to prepare and be present for move-in and move-out inspections, meaning they can't just schedule it last minute. You need to be able to be there, including an opportunity to obtain and complete necessary paperwork, and that includes the move-in inspection. The right to report inadequate housing standards or deficits in habitability of the housing unit to the landlord, the chain of command, and the housing management office without fear of reprisal or retaliation, including reprisal or retaliation in the following forms: unlawful recovery of or attempt to recover possession of the housing unit, unlawfully increasing the rent, decreasing services, or increasing the obligations of a tenant, interference with a tenant's right to privacy, harassment of a tenant, refusal to honor terms of the lease, or interference with the career of a tenant. This means they can't threaten your career, they can't increase your rent, they can't take anything out of your house, they can't say they're not going to uphold the lease. None of this can stop if you're reporting stuff that's not up to standard. So they can't come after you for anything if you're reporting things that aren't up to standard. Now, that doesn't mean you can't just stop paying your rent and expect them to roll over and play dead. Number 7 is the right of access to a military tenant advocate or a military legal assistance attorney through the housing management office of the installation of the department at which housing is located, and the preparation of requests to initiate dispute resolution. So in essence, you have the right to an attorney who actually understands this stuff and can help you. The right to receive property management services provided by a landlord that meet or exceed industry standards and are performed by professionally and appropriately trained, responsive, and courteous customer service and maintenance staff. So if they don't know what they're doing, please say something. This is your chance to say, hey, look, like, this is what property management's supposed to look like. They're not doing it. Now, that doesn't mean that the moment you pick up the phone, someone's going to show up at your house 5 minutes later ready to fix your plumbing. They still have a process to go through, but they should understand that process and be willing to help you and work with you on it. The right to have multiple convenient methods to communicate directly with the landlord, maintenance staff, and receive consistently honest, accurate, straightforward, and responsive communications. They should not ignore you. So you should be able to go to the housing office. You should be able to call the housing office. You should probably be able to email the housing office. This needs to be simple for you, and that's one of the rights that they're going to work on to make sure that you can get a hold of them to fix maintenance issues and that they will communicate with you. The right to access an electronic work order system through which a tenant may request maintenance or repairs of housing. Now, I know that this is already in. It's kind of a confusing process, but it's there. So hopefully they streamline that a little bit for you guys. With respect to maintenance and repairs to a housing unit, the right to the following: a prompt and professional maintenance and repair, and to be informed of the required time for maintenance and repairs when a maintenance request is submitted, and in case of emergency repairs necessary to ensure habitability of a housing unit, to prompt relocation in suitable lodging or housing at no cost to the tenant until the maintenance or repairs are completed. So they should respond to your request immediately. They should tell you when they're going to show up and take care of your response. And if they can't, like if it's an issue like no air conditioning or something that's like an emergency type thing, I don't know if air conditioning would be, but I guess it depends on the temperature outside. If there's no heat and it's 0 degrees, that'd probably be an emergency. Then you should be relocated at no cost to you until the maintenance is fixed. That'll incentivize them to fix it. Number 12, the right to receive advice from military legal assistance on procedures involving mechanisms or for resolving disputes with the property management company or property manager, to include mediation, arbitration, and filing claims against the landlord. Again, you have the right to an attorney to help you deal with all these issues. You have the right to have reasonable advance notice of any entrance by a landlord, installation housing staff, or chain of command into the housing unit, except in the case of an emergency or abandonment of the housing unit. So unless there's an emergency or that you've abandoned the unit, you have the right for them to notify you before they enter the premises. Number 14, the right to not pay non-refundable fees or have application or rents credits arbitrarily held. So essentially, they can't be charging you for crap. Like, hey, you need to give us this fee to move in, or there's an application credit that we're going to hold on to, or none of that craziness. And number 15, the right to expect common documents, forms, and processes for housing units will be the same for all installations of the department to the maximum extent acceptable or applicable without violating local, state, and federal regulations. So in essence, they're going to streamline so that all of the forms you sign for housing are going to be the same as much as they can be. I mean, there'll be some tweaks for state and federal laws in the area, but as much as they can be across the nation, which means that you won't be signing one form in California and then a totally different kind of form. Like, they're going to try to make it all streamlined so that it all makes sense for you. With respect to the remaining 3 rights, access to maintenance history, process for dispute resolution, and withholding of rent until disputes are resolved, the department will continue to work with MHPI companies and, as necessary, Congress to ensure the benefits of these rights are fully available. While the department develops standardized formal processes for these rights, service members and their families will be able to leverage the support available from their respective military departments to address and resolve relevant housing issues. Tenants seeking assistance should continue to engage their housing office, installation leadership, or chain of command. And there you see all the signatures. So what does this mean for you? This means you now have a piece of paper that you can print out or whatever and show your housing office and say, look, I have the right to this. Now, again, that doesn't mean you have the right to be just a terrible, terrible, terrible tenant and then go griping at your landlords. What it means is that if you live in your house and you keep it sanitary and you uphold your house, they are expected to provide you that housing and that level of care. So, for example, you have a nice house, your air conditioning goes out, they fix it. Bottom line. Something comes up, like a leak, they fix it. They are responsible for providing all this stuff. And if they fail to do that, you now have a way to force their hand, and it'll be coming down from the top. So you'll be able to actually take care of all this. Again, this doesn't mean you just get to go out and be a tyrant, but this is awesome. So if you guys like me doing some reaction videos on things like this that come out, please let me know. I'm totally happy to do more of these. It's really easy. Just slap the mic in, record the screen, and talk as I go. I'm all about doing this kind of stuff, but let me know if you liked it down below in the comments.